Robinhood debuting its first Super Bowl ad last night. The commercial's message, we're all investors. The focus wasn't on its current PR crisis and the stock trading frenzy around GameStop. And Reddit ran a 5-second ad that was inspired by Wall Street bets. It read at the end, powerful things happen when people rally around something they really care about. Joining us right now is Ed Lee. He's New York Times media reporter and, of course, a CNBC contributor, too. And, Ed, if you blinked, you missed this one, but I think they got their message across. 5 seconds may have been worth it in this case. What'd you think?
Yeah, no, they definitely got their money's worth. I mean, I actually rewound, my DVR and paused just so I could read it and what was this thing. And that's also the irony, right? You had a DVR to actually see the ad, and marketers and TV executives for long, have blamed DVRs for ad skipping sort of technology. So I actually think between Reddit and Robinhood, Reddit definitely won this one. And it was clever. It was really well done. And the 5 seconds, it's interesting that CBS even sold up a 5-second spot. But, for something that you hadn't seen before, Reddit definitely takes the cake.
Yeah, that was the surprise to me, the idea that CBS would even agree to a 5-second ad spot. You think this is going to spawn similar things like this down the road? Heck, why pay for the whole thing when you can just pay for 5 seconds?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The dynamic of what I saw with all the ad pods is that, I noticed a lot of house ads, probably more than we usually see during the Super Bowl, and I kind of wonder whether they're able to sell out every single possible, ad spot. And I think, if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I'll buy 5 seconds worth," and you haven't sold out a lot of the pods, they're probably like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." So I think that for sure, I think must have been a factor in terms of how that played out. I mean, 5 million or 5.5 million for 30 seconds. It's the most expensive it's ever been. So, and we still don't really know. I mean, in terms of how these Super Bowl audiences have been trending. I mean, it's always been around the 100 million mark in the last few years. It seems to be waning a little bit. So, we're going to wait to see what that looks like later in the day or tomorrow, even in terms of when those stats come out.
Ed, let's talk about the Robinhood commercial, which obviously was as if the last month hadn't really happened of craziness for them. I wonder whether that was by design. Presumably it was, but also the fact that a lot of these have been in production for quite some time, and maybe they just thought, well, let's purposefully leave it off, or we've already spent our money making this commercial. I don't want to change it.
Yeah, no, if you've already committed and you've already made the spot, I mean, clearly this spot was designed just to introduce everyday people to what Robinhood is. So in that way, it was probably effective, but sort of it ignored the entire controversy. And unless you've been living under a rock for the last few weeks, you're aware that there's something crazy happening on Wall Street and that Robinhood was part of it. So I think it was a definite miss and an unfortunate sort of circumstance where, the PR for this just ends up sort of compounding, right? That they're going to have to explain now why they didn't address what's been happening with this, this very sort of bland ad ultimately, this sort of kind of vanilla, like, hey, here's who we are, here's what we do, we're all investors. I mean, that was exactly the problem, right? That's what's under debate, whether everyone is an investor or not.
Hey, Ed, you mentioned house ads. I don't know if this counts as a house ad, but I actually thought it was one of my favorite ads of the whole night, and there were a series of them. And this was for Paramount Plus, the new streaming service coming from Paramount. Obviously, Viacom owns Paramount, Viacom owns CBS, but Patrick Stewart on the top of the Paramount Everest Mountain there, or whatever we're going to describe it as, with Colbert as the bartender.
I love how they had to kind of figure out the language around it. Yeah, no. I agree. I actually thought it was interesting, in terms of introducing people to a new thing. I thought that did a good job, and they strung it along, right? So that they had a narrative where you saw a few of these spots, and that they kind of created a whole sort of story around it. I thought it was effective. At the same time, I don't know if you noticed, but there was also a Disney Plus Hulu ad, or a bundled Disney streaming service ad toward in the second half of the game. That was also effective if you're in the market for streaming. So it's interesting that you had these sort of dueling streaming services ultimately kind of in one in one circumstance here. And yes, the Paramount ad was effective, but again, I think people might be confused in terms of, wait a minute, so you see all these different characters. I noticed that's a CBS show. I noticed that's something to do with, movies and Paramount and late night. So what is this again? So I think it piqued people's interest probably. But again, I think if you're not intimately familiar with the streaming setup or what Viacom CBS is, you might have been a little confused.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.